everybody. We are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. As ever, I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
And welcome to our celebration of Irish American Heritage Month. If you've been following our social media for the last few years, you know that we always celebrate this month, which is the month of March. Usually we do some blogs that coincides also with National Women's History Month. So the last 2 years we did a blog series highlighting Irish women you probably haven't heard of. But this year we decided to do something a little bit different or a little bit similar to what else we do with the rest of our content, and do some video chats and discussions about Irish film. So we're calling this the best and worst of Irish film because there are a lot of both of those categories. We've divvied it up into 4 themes. So we're going to be talking first about history and conflict. Then we're going to be moving on to films about the diaspora, which is a fun one to talk about. And then romantic stereotypes, which include lots of things like romantic stereotypes about actual romance, but also the romanticization of poverty and rural life and agricultural life and leprechauns. Lots of things get romanticized in Irish films. And then we'll be finishing up at the end of the month with some outliers that fit none of these categories, but are also excellent and horrible Irish films. So there's a lot under history and conflict is the big one. Like Irish history and conflict in Irish history, we could do a whole seminar course on it.
Probably.
But I think, for both Dr. Kristen and I, the ones we would have seen the most are any that have to do with Northern Ireland specifically, which is a huge chunk of the conflict category. Films that deal with the Troubles. And as I was like writing these down and trying to remember all the ones that I'd seen, I realized there's this kind of weird trend of time periods in which we produce lots of Irish films. And in the last 30 years. So there was loads in the 1990s that we're going to be talking about in every category.
Interesting.
I know. So the ones in the 1990s, conflict-related ones, we had In the Name of the Father with Daniel Day-Lewis, which is based on the true story of the Guildford pub bomb and the 4 men who were wrongfully accused and incarcerated for planting that bomb, which was an IRA bomb. And Susan Sarandon, I forgot. Susan Sarandon? No, Emma Thompson, sorry.
I was no, yeah, okay. Yeah, Emma Thompson's in that one. Yeah.
Emma Thompson is the lawyer in The Name of the Father. And The Crying Game were the 2 really big ones. Everyone in my family was like, oh, you have to see In the Name of the Father. Oh, have you seen The Crying Game? So those were really big ones about the Troubles. And then we jumped into the 2000s and went through a series of Troubles related ones, namely Steve McQueen's Hunger, which I still think is one of the better
I do too.
Conflict films. Any fans of Michael Fassbender out there and haven't seen his performance as Bobby Sands in Hunger should take a gander.
And please have your favorite emotional comfort beverage.
For all of these movies.
Hunger's for my money, just personally, what we're talking about, Hunger is the roughest visual sit for me. But your mileage is going to vary on these. So
yeah, we also had in the late 2000s 5 Minutes from Heaven.
Oh yeah.
5 minutes, 5 Minutes from Heaven, in Heaven, which is a fictionalized account of 2 real people kind of coming to grips with. One was a man named Alistair Little who was in the UVF, and he killed this other man's brother, shot him through the front window of his house when he was young. And so it's this brother and Alistair Little kind of grappling with 30 years on, starring the beloved sons of Northern Ireland, Liam Neeson and Jim Nesbitt, who appear in so many of these.
And then right around this time too, Mickey Bo and Me, I think, was mid-aughts, which is this really precious story of these 2 wee boys, one Protestant and one Catholic, and how they were really good friends and then because they were Protestant and Catholic, they pretty much couldn't be anymore. Like in that process.
Yeah, Mickey Mo and Me is a good one.
It's really precious. It's real hard to find in America. So if you ever stumble across it, definitely give it a watch. But it's adorable and heartbreaking.
It is.
Much like Ireland itself.
So we were thinking about, there's the Michael Collinses of it all, in which, I mean, one of the things that I think makes for a really bad Irish film is the accents.
Yeah, guys, just real quick. There are a lot of Irish accents.
Yeah.
If you can't do one well, pick another.
And like, Michael Collins is interesting, right? Because you've got a good mix of Irish and non-Irish actors. So you've got Liam Neeson, again, playing the titular role of Michael Collins. You've got, a couple of other pretty big name Irish actors in the 90s. And then you've got Julia Roberts.
She's where this all falls down for me in that particular movie.
And Julia Roberts at peak Julia Roberts time too. Like 1996 was like peak Julia Roberts. And I think for me, it's one of those things of like hiring people that are super recognizable, and it's a problem because I never see whoever she's playing Michael Collins' love interest in that movie. I forget, based on a real woman. I can't remember that woman's name. And I just look, every time I see her, I see Julia Roberts.
This is the Russell Crowe principle of Russell Crowe and Les Mis. That man was horribly miscast, but he was Russell Crowe.
Yeah. So I think that's,
So there's some other good Troubles ones. There's one called 71.
Well, for my money, that's the best one.
We would highly recommend 71.
Yep.
And there's a couple others that, like, if you see them, please make sure to Google afterwards, stuff like that. We've covered the documentary about the Miami Show Band Massacre that's on Netflix. So documentary, not a fictionalized, but still, like, that's good. There's some more good documentaries. It's harder to find well done fictional stories that, I think the thing with a Northern Irish Trouble story is that you need it to be so tiny, like 71 was.
Yeah,
like,
where it was literally like days. 71 covered like days. Yeah. Bloody Sunday is another really good one, and it covers like a day.
Yeah, and so Oma is another movie that most people from Oma that I know don't like, but don't like it for a whole lot of reasons that may or may not have to do with them being from Oma.
Right.
But it does, and it takes a lot of liberties. Mm-hmm. But I think it's good at creating the emotion of the day, not the facts. It blurs a lot of those. But
so there's the conflict, the Troubles related ones. We already mentioned Michael Collins, which is kind of the founding of the Irish state. The biggest one for me in terms of like Irish state level conflict was The Wind That Shakes the Barley, which is still one of the best movies I've ever seen. Never mind a movie made in Ireland. But it stars Cillian Murphy. I saw it in Ireland, in Cork City, in the year it came out in the cinemas. And it's very, very, it's got everything that you look for in an Irish film, like anti-British sentiment, violence, romance, bicycle rides through the country, lots of green.
Sweeping vistas of green meadows.
Yeah, all of the things that are, you have to, it's the tick box you have to have if it's an Irish film.
There's sheep.
Yeah, loads of sheep and flat caps, patty caps.
You gotta have a patty cap and a sheep and a bicycle. You gotta have a barn. All these things.
These things that we joke, but just wait until we get to romantic stereotypes and all the films that you know and love that fit all of those boxes. But there's some other areas of Irish history that can be covered and could be covered more. Black 47 is a film neither of us have seen, but came out recently, that is apparently set during the Irish Famine. But I know a lot of people who saw it and a lot of people who liked it. So the famine is also a particularly popular narrative in Irish fiction. We just haven't seen that translate to very popular Irish films. If there are Irish films out there about the famine that you guys know about, please shout it out, because those aren't the ones that I watched growing up, if they're out there. But the final category that I want to give Dr. Kristen some chance to explain and talk about, because if you've noticed that all of the categories and movies we've talked about are stories about men, you're right. Most of the conflict-related, historical-related films, Irish films, focus on the experiences of men, of male combatants, police officers, paramilitaries, British agents, you name it, or political figures. But there are a subsect of films, there have only been a couple talking about women's experiences, particularly women's experiences relating to the Catholic Church. And Dr. Kristen will explain a little bit more about what those films cover and what films they are and why you need to see them.
So you may have heard I'm terrible with dates, guys. A couple years ago, time has no meaning. My husband and I anecdotally cleaned out our pantry this weekend and realized that we don't understand the passage of time. So we were like, oh, this food's been in here for a long time.
A long time.
I thought I bought it last week. Got it. A couple years ago, Judi Dench was nominated for an Oscar for a movie that no one could pronounce called Philomena, which told the story of a woman who was trying to find her adopted son.
It was 2013. I wrote it down.
Thank you. Yeah. And Steve Coogan's in it. And what we discover through a whole lot of things is that Philomena's son was taken from her by the Irish state and sold to an American family because Philomena was pregnant out of wedlock. I hate that word, but that's what it was classified as. And she was put into an institution for a short period of time, in which after she gave birth, her son was taken from her. Mm-hmm. There are two primary ways that the Irish Church controlled the reproductive behaviors of girls, pretty much since its founding up until the early to mid 90s. One of them were called mothers and babies homes. Mm-hmm. And the other were laundries, where women were literally put to work by the state as indentured servants to work off their penance for being women who had sex, essentially.
Yeah, to work off their sin.
There is a real shameful part of American history that's tied in this that I don't think enough Americans know about, which is that Americans were the ones that bought these children.
It adopted all these babies. Yep.
And yes, the Americans were told that they, the church is the complicit one. The church is the problem here. But the American adoption agencies too that worked with it didn't ask enough questions. And they were all told that these were orphans. They were not orphans. Their mothers were watching them climb into cars with strangers. Philomena does a really great job of showing the consequences of that. Mm-hmm. And as an Irish state, they are still not fully reckoned with this at all. There's one of the things about Irish history is that there's a lot of it that's very emotional, and it's really, and the loudest part is always going to be surrounding conflict, because that's been a perpetual reality within the island for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so the human trauma often gets lost in the larger narratives. And so there are inquiries and there are perhaps restitutions in some way, but the stories can never be told enough. Hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of families were irreparably changed because the Catholic Church was in collusion with the Irish state, and both of them were afraid of teenage girls having sex. Mm-hmm. That's fundamentally what happened. Mm-hmm. So the mothers and babies homes are terrible enough. In Philomena's case, after she gave birth, she left. And in a lot of the mother and babies homes, that was the case.
Yeah.
The other side is the laundries, some of whom were still in operation. I'm going to go up to 96.
I think it was 96 or 97. Yeah.
Yeah. It is like around the Atlanta Olympics. I remember thinking that as I first read it. I was like, I was cheering I was cheering Carrie Strug and there were women. Okay. Yeah. A time in which I felt insanely privileged. These were, again, indentured servants. The abuses that the girls and the women endured in these facilities that were run largely by nuns they'll make your blood curdle. They really will. The Magdalene Girls is a movie about that experience. And for my money, those are the two kind of best entry points to both of these stories. There are so many books and so many great documentaries. Yeah. More and more women Philomena was a very big empowering thing, I'll say, for a lot of Irish women that I know personally. Yeah. That when it came out, it became a little bit more okay to start talking about the fact that you knew somebody who went to one of the homes or you went to one of the homes. Yeah. I had a really fascinating conversation with a lovely woman in a pub once, literally telling me that she was the only one of her friends who didn't go to a home. Right. And what that felt like and how she was pumped for information about them and like, what did it mean to be friends with somebody who was fallen and kind of all these things. And this was all happening in the 60s. Yeah. And it just should all serve to remind us that everywhere you are, there are stories you don't know. Yeah. But I don't love watching the Troubles movies as much. I mean, there are people, Dr. Erin has seen a lot more of them than I have because she used to teach a course that involved film and the Troubles. But I feel a lot of emotional, like, bearing witness to watch as many things as I can about the stories of women in this period of Irish history. So I've seen quite a lot of the documentaries, but your best entry points are Philomena and the Magdalene Girls. Yeah, and like, I remember watching the Magdalene Sisters, like, when it came out or shortly after it came out, but it certainly didn't have the, like, widespread impact as Philomena. And that's obviously because Judi Dench is a really big name and, like, it got nominated and she got nominated and then things start to get a lot more press. But there was a lot of time in between those two movies. But I'd say Philomena is a great starting off point for that. The Wind That Shakes the Barley is a really great starting off point for early 20th century Irish history. And please put the subtitles on and don't feel like I tell everyone to put the subtitles on. By subtitles. My students had to ask me for subtitles all the time. And I'd be like, what, you can't understand their West Cork accents? No? Okay. Oh, makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, the accents are tricky, especially in movies that are loud with lots of violence and conflict going on, even without that. So we'll have a list of recommendations at the bottom of this. We would love to see more stories told and different stories told under these very large subheadings and lots of more stories about women. So fingers crossed those start appearing in our Netflix queue. Kind of the Derry Girls bump. Maybe we'll get a Derry Girls bump in Irish films. I don't know. We'll see. And if you are one of our friends that's watching this in Ireland and there's stuff that's coming out that we don't know about because we're only there twice a year, please let us know. And we will, because we want to keep an eye as well. That's right. So that's everything we have for week 1 of our best and worst Irish films. We'll be back next week talking about romantic stereotypes, which will be a lot more fun than this past video. So many sheep, guys. So many sheep. And bad accents. Sheep and bad accents. Lord. All right. See you guys then. Bye.